What if you could navigate your entire day? I mean, the traffic, unfair criticism from a boss, a family member who just, knows how to push your buttons, and maintain perfect internal calm.
What if you could just observe all that chaos without actually participating in it?
Right. Because most people treat negative emotions, especially anger and frustration, as this inevitable, almost involuntary reaction.
Exactly. They truly believe that when someone acts difficult, the corresponding negative emotion is, well, it's required. That the external world just dictates your internal state.
And that's the provocative premise we're dismantling today. The truth is, your emotional reactions are controlled by you, period.
Not by the driver who cut you off.
Or the colleague who missed a deadline, or the partner who forgot to take out the trash. Our mission in this deep dive is to synthesize the psychological and neurological strategies that can make you emotionally unshakable.
We're basically providing a complete system.
Yeah, the science, the psychological traps, and the step-by-step techniques for gaining true emotional independence.
And to achieve that freedom from reactivity, you have to do two things. First, you have to accept full responsibility for your internal state. And second, you need to understand the specific neural processes that are, currently keeping you trapped in that cycle.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get to the concrete solutions, we have to identify the traps.
Yes.
These are the psychological mistakes we all make that guarantee we remain vulnerable to every difficult person and frustrating situation we run into.
That's right. Our sources highlight three fundamental errors in thinking. The first is what we call the personalization trap.
Okay.
This is the error of interpreting other people's actions as deliberate attacks on us.
So if I send an email and the response is slow, my brain immediately goes to, they are disrespecting me. They don't value my time or my work.
Precisely. You assume malice when often it's just distraction or, frankly, incompetence. When you personalize, you automatically cast yourself as the victim.
And you're constantly scanning the environment for signs of attack or being slighted. And that emotional vigilance is just exhausting.
It is.
I get the personalization trap, but let me challenge that for a moment. Sometimes it is personal. What if my boss genuinely dislikes me? Doesn't detachment just become denial in that scenario?
That's a really important question, even if the action is malicious. I mean, even if your boss genuinely dislikes you, the personalization trap is still the error of assuming the impact on your internal state is mandatory.
Oh.
Their dislike is a fact of the external world, which you can't control. Your emotional stability, though, that is a choice you make internally. You can observe their malice without absorbing it.
Understood. It's about not letting their bad behavior become my bad day. So what about the problems that come up when we look outward and demand something of the world?
That brings us right to the second trap, the expectation trap. This is having rigid, often unspoken expectations about how people should behave.
You expect perfect punctuality, universal respect, that everyone should basically follow your personal rule book.
And since reality, rarely conforms to a person's perfect internal model.
This sets you up for constant, inevitable disappointment.
Precisely. People act according to their values, their circumstances, their level of awareness, not yours. To become emotionally unshakable, you have to release the rigid expectation that the world must conform to your preferences.
You can prefer punctuality, but if you demand it, every traffic jam becomes this huge personal crisis.
Exactly. Releasing that expectation is freedom.
And finally, the third trap. This is the one that I think fuels so much unnecessary conflict.
The control trap. This is the delusion that your anger or your frustration can somehow force others to change their behavior.
The idea that if I get angry enough, they'll finally see the light and do what I want.
Yeah, and that almost never works, does it? Your anger doesn't educate. It usually just makes others more defensive, more resistant, maybe even fearful. You can't control other people. The only thing you can absolutely control is your own response.
Here's where it gets really, really interesting. It's not just in your head. There's a primitive physical process happening when we get triggered that literally disables our higher reasoning. Tell us about the science of emotional hijacking.
Okay, so when your brain perceives any kind of threat, and it could be a bear in the woods or a social slight like being ignored, the amygdala, which is this almond-shaped alarm center deep in your brain, triggers an emotional hijack.
And this happens in milliseconds.
Milliseconds. And that mechanism is designed for raw survival, not for polite conversation.
Right.
Stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, immediately flood your system, getting you ready for fight, flight, or freeze. And the crucial impact here is that during this flood, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain right behind your forehead that handles rational thought, logic,
All
planning,
the smart stuff.
all the smart stuff, it temporarily goes offline.
That resonates so deeply. I've definitely been in conversations where I've looked back later and wondered, who said that incredibly petty thing? Oh, right, it was me. It felt like my conscious brain just wasn't in charge.
It wasn't. Your ancient survival system took the wheel. This is why highly intelligent, reasonable people can become so irrational and aggressive when they're triggered. Their rational brain is temporarily disabled.
The good news is that the initial chemical surge has a limited duration. So where is the critical intervention point?
The initial intense flood lasts only about 6 to 20 seconds.
That's it.
That's it. That tiny window is your opportunity to intervene before the flood becomes a high tide. You need to identify the physical warning signs. A sudden jump in heart rate, shallow breathing, tense muscles, or just rapid escalating negative thoughts. Those signs are your cue.
So knowing the traps and the signs of the hijack, how do we stop the process in those critical seconds? We need immediate, tangible action.
Okay, the sources outline two powerful protocols. The first line of defense is the pause protocol. The fundamental principle is simple. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies your power to choose. The pause actively creates that space.
How do we actually practice this when our blood pressure is already, going up?
You start with level 1, the breath pause. The instant you notice those physical warning signs, you interrupt the pattern by taking 3 deep, slow breaths.
And the specific technique matters. Right.
It's crucial because it's neurological, not just meditative. You inhale slowly for a count of 4, hold for 4, and then exhale slowly for a count of 6.
Why the long exhale?
The reason the longer exhale works is physiological. It actively stimulates the vagus nerve, which runs from your brainstem down through your abdomen. This is the direct switch that tells your parasympathetic nervous system, your body's rest and digest response, to override the fight or flight hormones the amygdala just released.
You're literally using your breath to chemically calm your own brain.
That's exactly what you're doing.
So if 3 breaths aren't enough, especially in a high-stakes meeting, what's level 2?
Level 2, the physical pause. If the chemical flood is just too intense, you need to physically exit the situation. Excuse yourself, go to the restroom, take a short walk.
Or just change your physical position.
Even that helps. Movement helps metabolize the stress hormones. You can use a simple phrase like, I need a moment to think about this. That's not weakness, that's strategic mastery.
Okay, so the pause buys you time, but that time is kind of wasted if you just go right back into the same emotional story. You need to use that space to change the narrative.
And that brings us to the reframe revolution.
Right.
The core realization here is that your emotional response is dictated by your interpretation, the story you tell yourself about the facts, not the facts themselves. And our automatic stories often cast us as the victim.
Let's take a common, painful scenario. You're in a performance review, and your boss gives you overly critical feedback that feels unfair. The immediate destructive story is, she doesn't appreciate me, I'm worthless.
So we have to reframe that. We can apply one of 4 reframing techniques right away. First, the ignorance reframe. Assume the bad behavior comes from a lack of awareness, not malice.
So the new story is, she's focusing on my 3 weaknesses because she doesn't know how to motivate high performers.
Exactly. It generates compassion for her poor management style, not anger at her criticism. Second is the pain reframe. Assume the difficult person is in pain themselves.
She's under immense pressure from above, and she's treating me the way she's being treated. Hurt people hurt people.
Right. That shifts you from defensiveness to empathy, which instantly lowers your own threat response. Then there's the learning reframe.
Okay.
View the frustrating situation as an opportunity to practice your skills. The new story becomes, this is a perfect opportunity to practice the pause and the breath technique under pressure.
This difficult situation is my advanced training. I like that one.
And finally, the growth reframe. See criticism as valuable information, even if it's poorly delivered. Regardless of her tone, the feedback about my timeline management is probably true, and now I have a roadmap for my development.
That is extremely practical. In every single case, you're choosing a plausible story that moves you toward a resourceful emotional state.
Exactly. Your reaction becomes voluntary, not mandatory.
So what does this all mean for, long-term peace and stability? It leads directly to this idea of emotional independence.
Right. Where your internal state is determined by your choices, not by the external randomness of the world. And this is what we call the detachment system.
Most people are emotionally dependent. Their mood depends on traffic, on validation.
On whether their expectations are met. Detachment means you deliberately stop attaching your emotional well-being to things you cannot control.
Let's break down the principles of this system.
Okay, the first principle is emotional self-sufficiency. You must commit to meeting your own emotional needs. Validation, security, worthiness internally.
Not depending on others to beat them for you.
Yes. If you need a difficult boss to validate you, you've basically handed them the keys to your anxiety. Dependence equals vulnerability.
That is so powerful. If I internalize my own worth and I don't need your approval, your rudeness or criticism becomes functionally irrelevant to my internal state.
Precisely. And that leads to outcome independence. Your emotional well-being doesn't rise and fall with external results or the whims of others. And finally, there's boundary mastery.
Establishing clear boundaries between your emotions and theirs.
Yes, you can empathize with their pain, that's the pain reframe, without absorbing it or feeling obligated to fix their issues.
And this all comes down to real-world application, especially when facing those people who just know how to push our buttons. We found a great model in the research that breaks down difficult personalities into 4 clear archetypes.
And gives us a playbook for each one, because responding to the underlying pattern keeps you strategic, not reactive. First, let's look at the aggressive dominator, the yellers, the intimidators.
And our instinct there is often to either fight back with the same energy or just submit.
We must do neither. The strategy is to refuse to match their energy. You use emotional contagion in reverse by remaining profoundly calm, speaking in a lower, slower tone. And you employ the broken record technique.
How does that actually sound? If the dominator is yelling, "This report is garbage, fix it now," I shouldn't engage with the garbage claim.
Exactly. You calmly reply, I hear your frustration, and I want to find a solution that works for both of us. If they yell again, you just repeat the same phrase calmly. Your lack of reactivity is the firmest boundary.
That is very effective. What about the subtle attackers? The ones who weaponize ambiguity?
That's the passive-aggressive manipulator, the silent treatment experts, the ones who say, I'm fine, while they're clearly steaming. Since their behavior thrives on ambiguity, the strategy is radical transparency.
And how do you do that without becoming the aggressor yourself?
You state the observation, not a judgment. I notice you said you're fine, but you seem distant. I'd prefer if you could tell me directly what the obstacle is. You just calmly call out the discrepancy.
You refuse to reward the manipulation by guessing what they want.
Precisely.
Then we have the classic energy sink.
The emotional vampire, the constant complainers, the crisis seekers. The key here is compassionate detachment. You have to set strict time limits.
So before the conversation even begins, I need a clear exit strategy.
Yes. You might start with, I have 15 minutes to talk about this, how can I help? And crucially, do not offer unsolicited advice. Vampires often don't want solutions. They want an audience for their suffering.
And finally, the most exhausting type, the one who needs constant validation.
The narcissistic attention seeker. They monopolize conversations, they exaggerate, they feed on drama. The strategy here is strategic disengagement. Do not compete for their attention and don't feed their need for drama.
So if they launch into some exaggerated story about their latest triumph, what do I do?
Give a brief, polite acknowledgement, that's interesting, and immediately redirect the attention elsewhere. Back to the group or the topic. When they realize their dramatic energy isn't getting any fuel from you, they often move on.
The profound takeaway here is that none of their behavior is actually personal. It's about their own coping mechanisms. By responding to the pattern, not the person, you stay strategic.
And this brings us to the good news for the learner. This isn't about willpower, it's about skill development, thanks to neuroplasticity. Your brain can literally be rewired for calm.
Every time you choose the pause protocol or practice a reframe, you are creating and reinforcing new, conscious neural pathways. And the old, reactive, amygdala-driven pathways get weaker.
That's how we accelerate change. We adopt the mastery mindset, which says there are no failures, only data. When you slip up and react, you don't judge yourself, you just analyze.
What was the trigger?
Yeah.
What physical signs did I miss? What was the automatic negative story I told myself?
And you use that objective data to refine your approach for next time, rather than falling into a shame cycle.
And the long-term result of this consistent practice is what you call the unshakable state.
This is the deep inner stability that truly defines emotional freedom. It shows up as genuine confidence that isn't dependent on external approval, and it leads to significantly improved physical health because you're reducing that daily drip of chronic stress hormones.
So what does this all mean? We started by identifying the 3 emotional traps: personalization, expectation, and control. We moved to the science of the emotional hijack and gave you the neurological counter techniques, the pause protocol, and the reframe revolution.
And then we provided a concrete playbook for handling the 4 most common triggering personality types.
All grounded in the knowledge that you can rewire your brain for calmness. The choice is always there for you.
The profound result of this dedicated practice is true emotional freedom. You become the author of your own emotional experience.
And that choice creates this quiet strength that fundamentally changes how you interact with the world.
Final provocative thought. You can continue being bothered by difficult people, allowing their actions to dictate your mood and your energy, or you can commit to the practice required to become someone who is never bothered by anyone. Emotional mastery is not about becoming emotionless. It's about making conscious choice your new default. Once you begin this practice in earnest, you will wonder how you ever lived any other way.